This is Professor Mike Ventola from Sandhills Community College, bringing you Grass of the Week. Welcome to our 6th week of Grass of the Week. We're going to start our 3rd major category, which is the fescues. So this week we're going to talk about tall fescue, and next week we're going to talk about quite a few of the fine fescues. Tall fescue is an important grass for the transition zone. It is used quite extensively in the Piedmont. It is the most widely used lawn grass in that area and probably the source of the most revenues for most of the landscapers in the Charlotte, Raleigh, and Greensboro areas. If you go up to Raleigh, we've got this is Hazen Tree Golf Course, and you can see that along the roadways it's very common to see tall fescue, and this is recently sodded tall fescue on the way into the golf course for that curb appeal. People really like this grass. So I want you to take out your book, and we're going to follow along tall fescue. We're going to end up on page 26, start with rolled vernation, and follow right through as we go through the way to identify this grass. You can see up on the right of this slide we've got a close-up of the tall fescue leaf. It's much wider than many of the leaves we've already talked about, and again it's rolled, so you're going to put it in your fingers. You can see my fingers there. If I was to spin those back and forth, this would just roll and flip around. It would not flip around at all. It would just roll like a Tootsie Roll wrapper in your hand. It's not going to flip. The ligule is short, about 0.5 of a millimeter, and it could be jagged. So that's where we're going to look for the ligule, which will be right in there. A little bit jagged and membranous. So membranous, so very, very thin, almost translucent. The auricle, here they're not clasping. Recall that our not clasping, they're not coming together. Recall that our annual ryegrass, they clasped. They came all the way around, but on the tall fescue, they're not. They might have a few short hairs, but that's one of the big distinctions to tell this grass from the annual ryegrass, because it's going to have very similar leaf. The growth habit is a bunch type. This is one of my highlighted features. It's important. It's important for this grass. This is not going to be a grass that's going to spread well. If it dies off, which it often does in the summer from brown patch, it's going to come back from the sides, and the leaves on the edge where there's no plants are going to get very large and can sometimes seem even unsightly. The sheath is round and open. The collar is divided. The blade is going to have a very sharp pointed tip. It's going to come like that, and then you see this real prominent venation on that, and then it's rough edges here. So that's where I'm talking about, the rough edges, which is going to be also different from the annual ryegrass. So at first glance they could look similar to the annual ryegrass, but when you look closer, these rough edges, the non-clasping auricle, the wider leaf blade, you're going to be able to tell the difference between those two grasses. So make sure you spend some time in lab trying to distinguish those two. Here we can see a golf course. This is Bermuda grass, so warm season, C4 here. Then we've got our C3 grass here. And you can see the sign, stay out of the yard, and they've conveniently cut the yard about 3 inches, so any golf ball is going to go in there and you're not going to find it at all. But it's an attractive looking grass in front of this McMansion here up in Raleigh. This is, I think, at the Raleigh TPC golf course. Pretty expensive grass. If you fertilize it, if you control for brown patch with fungicide, and have a lawn care service and seed it every year, you can have a pretty nice lawn, but it's pretty water intensive. And I would think that as we move forward into water restrictions, we're going to see less and less areas of tall fescue. But people are just dead set on having green lawns at their house, even though you can see this area is not really being used for much. It's not an athletic field. It's just for aesthetics, and they're probably, in my opinion, a better way to spend your money than on a beautiful tall fescue lawn. But some people have a lot of money and like to do that, so there's a whole industry built around providing that. And after this course, you will all be able to provide a lawn like that. Again, some of the weaknesses of tall fescue: this wide leaf blade. It originally was a forest grass. If anyone says I want to get some of that K31, Kentucky 31 tall fescue is a forage grass. That means it was meant for cows to eat. It's not for home lawns. So don't buy it. This is available at Lowe's and Home Depot. They're trying to sell it. There's a lot of seed. The seed's very variable, and the seed's not of good quality. There are much better improved tall fescue cultivars. Dr. Frazier, who I've shown you before, has a couple called, one called Wolfpack and one called Tar Heel. You take your pick. These grasses are much more resistant to brown patch, and that's pretty much been one of the major focuses of her research up in Roseville. Again, a coarse blade. You can see, particularly when it butts up against another, there's some bluegrass or some ryegrass. It's going to be clumpy and big. Rolled vernation. It's a bunch grass, very important. It establishes fairly quickly, not as fast as annual ryegrass, but similar to perennial ryegrass, maybe even a little bit faster, and much, much faster than Kentucky bluegrass. So it is useful for lawn care professionals because they can seed, they can get in there, rough up the soil, seed, and then they have a grass that's adequate in the fall, and they'll get them through the spring, and in the summer they'll kill it again, and they'll be able to come in and do that again. It is somewhat deep-rooted. I don't call it drought-resistant. I call it drought-avoidant. Compared to the grasses that have a smaller root system around them, it will stay greener longer. But once it goes dead, it goes dead. It doesn't come back. Like Kentucky bluegrass will come back. There are rhizomes down in the ground that act like seeds, and the grass will completely come back if you turn the water off. If you turn the water off on a field of tall fescue, once it dies, it's dead. The other grasses around it, some may live, some may die, they will go dormant first. So people like this because it's a deep-rooted grass, but I think that really gives you a false sense of security, because if you have a whole field of tall fescue, they're mining the same amount of water, and it will go dormant at the same time. You can water less, often, more frequently, deeper with this grass, which is a good thing, but I still think that it's a bit of an overrated grass, and I'm really not a fan of tall fescue for athletic fields or home lawns in this area. One of the past problems we had with this grass was orchard grass contamination. You can see here's a Kentucky 31 plot of seed, and there's all kinds of much yellower color. That's orchard grass. Orchard grass grows a yellower color and much faster, and we're going to show that. So you want to be careful, and you do want to look at trials. And then here's David Stone's honor course, and he uses tall fescue around his bunkers, and you can see he doesn't, around his tees, excuse me, and he does not mow that area. So I said, Dave, man, you get a lot of fertilizer, and they says, yeah, it comes from the sod farm, really jazzed up. We planted. So this was a year old. Eventually it will go a little browner and fit in more where he doesn't have to mow it as much. He doesn't have to take care of it. So this area up here might be some tall fescue that he's allowed to go to seed. But when they built this new tee, they did sod around that, and they've got to get that nitrogen out of there by mowing and not fertilizing it. So, but it will be an effective grass for a situation like this, a low maintenance tee surround. The Grass of the Week music is the Sand Hills Community College Jazz Band, directed by Tim Haley.